Hello there, and welcome everybody to our session on the AI Recruitment Accelerator Training Sampler. That's a bit of a mouthful. This is meant simply to be an example of what the number of AI Today in HR BFI courses covering artificial intelligence and all the different use cases that the Human Resource Department can use with it will be covering. My name is Jeff Wellstead. I have about 35 years of experience in human resources management, um, both in the United States and here. In the last 20 years, I've been focused primarily on building HR from scratch, including installing and implementing a lot of HR technologies. The past 2.5, 3 years has been laser focused on the use of large language models and AI, basically to solve, in particular, all of the challenges that often come up within human resources and to help people understand how they can accelerate their understanding and actually start playing with this stuff immediately and start to see results very quickly. So in every one of the courses about within the BFI series, we will always ever cover off what the learning objectives are for the students and just make that clear that by the end of a particular session, they should be able to ... We will also kind of spell out what students can expect in terms of what they'll be able to accomplish and what they'll be able to perform by the end of the session. We'll explain also, as always, the core skills and sort of the learning content specific to the human as much as the technology. And we'll also obviously try to capture everybody's interest and make this as much of a live demonstration and in some cases live participation with the students so that they can actually get their hands directly on the large language models and they can actually see how to build prompts and how to actually get terrific outputs. So as you can see, basically from the slides, here, we are all about how to transform the recruitment process, painful as it often is today, and try to reduce time to hire while improving candidate quality and diversity. That's really kind of the main focus of today. So we just want to go ahead and get cracking with that right away. The main objective here is to help you identify and to kind of leverage HR tools in part to enhance the recruitment process. In the full classroom, we will talk about a whole set of tools that are capable of doing this for you. But in today's kind of sampler kit, we're basically just going to cover three. But we're going to focus on three key areas here. We're going to be focusing on discovering and evaluating AI technologies that can boost efficiency, fairness, and across the entire hiring pipeline. We also want to, even though these tools can be really useful and wonderful, we want to also train and teach you how to utilize large language models, or LLMs, as I'll refer to them, the ones that you already know about, ChatGPT and Claude, Gemini, Perplexity, these types of tools, to really kind of hone and laser focus on particular aspects of the recruitment process, which may be capabilities that are outside the realm of the current TA technology that you have in place. And then we also want to help you master the art of prompt engineering, which sounds fancy. It sounds hard. It's not. It's really not engineering. It's really natural language. It's just the way in which you structure that natural language that can help you get to fantastic outcomes much more effectively than by simply just saying, I think I need this. So we'll go through all that too. These capabilities, of course, are not replacements for what you already know how to do. The human mind is amazing. It's an incredible supercomputer, and we can't replace, nor will AI, I think, be able to replace, your full stack recruitment process through and through. I think it's always critically important, especially regarding human judgment and perspective and experience and learnings, that humans always ever be involved in this process. Not to mention, of course, that human contact is super important when you're making a new introduction to people who you've not met yet and you're trying to attract to your organization. So by the end of the session, I think you'll have a solid understanding of how to integrate AI into the recruitment process and to drive better outcomes. Essential AI recruitment skills include, I think, identifying process bottlenecks. I think that's really sort of the whole magic. When you think about AI transformation, it's really AI augmentation, which is in addition to you and your brain. And it's basically giving you that extra boost. It's giving you that extra insight. And in some cases, as you have heard about, there are notions like AI agents that actually can be programmed to autonomously handle an entire process. And in some cases, there are companies that have adopted recruitment tools that can actually try to handle everything from initial attraction through to screening calls, through to scheduling for interviews, taking notes, sharing those notes, analyzing those notes, and then helping hiring managers basically come up with their shortlist to determine who amongst them would be sort of suitable for the position. Okay, very seldom do you hear people utilizing AI for that entire process. There are ample opportunities for a human in the loop to kind of be part of it, and I would strongly encourage that always ever be the case. Having said that, what you don't want to do is unleash the power of AI on a process that's broken, that's bottlenecked, that requires workarounds or constant escalations and changes. That's the whole point here. We need to do away with those legacy broken processes. And instead, what we want to do is we want to change those for the better, for create an ideal pathway, basically. Teach that to an AI agent and basically have the AI agent reset and restructure the way in which we engage with our candidates going forward. The business impact, especially in recruitment, is massive. And I'm only showing a sliver of it here. But currently in the UK, it takes anywhere between like 45 to 60 days, basically to hire somebody, and oftentimes longer, in my experience, especially when you're going for those rare specialized skills. That's painful, as we'll get into in a minute. But what I'm suggesting here is that by the use of your brain in retooling the process, and then adding AI as an augmentation, you can reduce that time to hire to less than 20 days. That can save the organization minimally 3,000 pounds, okay? And oftentimes a heck of a lot more. And again, I'll kind of explain why. And hopefully give us anywhere between 30 and 40% more time back that's not otherwise wasted. So the key steps for a practical AI implementation for the hiring process would be, number one, to anonymize the candidate data. Why do I say that? These large language models, LLMs, are tools that absorb information. The more information they can absorb is the more they can learn, the more that they can then respond back to in terms of accurate insight and so forth. So they have, as a built-in mechanism, the capability basically to monitor all of our interactions with AI and to pull in data sets that we upload to it. There are now versions of these tools that are coming out that in fact are set up for enterprise organizations, which will basically hive off and firewall protect, if you will, your core information. Having said that, I'm not entirely certain that that's even provable. So I would just always ever opt for, if you're going to be using sensitive data that's going to be covered by things like privacy protection or GDPR rules and things of that nature, always ever make sure you anonymize the data set. And what I simply mean by that is remove the names, remove the personally identifiable information, or PII, as I like to refer to it, and just replace it with a random, unique identifier for each of those individuals that you can basically reverse engineer when you get back out again, okay? And I'll explain to you, you'll see it in a minute. It sounds really complicated. It's so not complicated. It's just good, smart management of sensitive information. So anonymize the candidate data, create structured prompts with clear evaluation criteria. That's really key. Again, this is where the human brain comes in and helps drive this process brilliantly, okay? It's down to our judgment. It's down to how it is we set up the experiment, the measurement, the assessment, and what parameters we give the tool, the AI tool, to basically utilize, okay? That's down to us and our good thinking and problem solving. So we have to create the structured prompts with clear evaluation criteria and the appropriate weighting of the particular evaluation criteria to create as accurate an output as we possibly can. And I'll show you a live demo in a second. And of course, we want to continue to iterate on these prompts. Just because we entered in something to AI and it gave us a response, it doesn't mean it's 100% correct. In fact, 90% of the time, it's not going to be, because there's something we forgot to ask it, or it shared back to us something that we thought, oh, maybe you might have misunderstood my instruction. That's totally fine. It's very normal. That's the whole point of natural language interface. You just basically say, oh, no, it's not quite that. It's this, and here's why. Great, the machine says, and off it goes and fixes it. Okay. So that's basically those elements there. Let me talk a little bit about common pitfalls and solutions. Okay, bias creep. You've heard a lot about bias in large language models. Bias is basically the sort of built-in filters that our brains have learned over the course of time, and likely were handed down genetically over the course of millions of years, to be honest, or thousands of years minimally, that basically tell us when certain things seem to be happening, we need to respond in this way, or we need to think in that way. Okay. There are something like 10 to 12 different cognitive biases that have been identified that are associated with the recruitment process. And the recruitment process really is nothing more than meeting a new human being that you've not met typically for the first time, and how it is you assess that individual. Okay. So you can imagine how many different filters and how many different angles we typically would have that our subconscious would employ before we actually even get to a level of conscious awareness. It's very, very easy to slip into this. Even seasoned TA individuals, people who have been trained about cognitive bias, yes, become aware of it as they're going through it, but oftentimes, in retrospect, looking back on it, they can see that their recruitment processes and initial assessments oftentimes were flawed in some way, shape, or form. Okay. So we want to avoid that. So bias creep is a thing to avoid. And the idea of basically giving the LLMs the ability to assess using weighted criteria, it helps that process immensely. Not to mention the anonymization of the candidates, because then that whole bias associated with age, with race, with gender, with whatever it is that your brain kind of like hooks into, that also is obviously taken now out of the picture. Hallucinations. This is super important. These large language models were trained on billions, and in some cases trillions, of tokens of information and bits of information that basically fit together like Lego blocks, but actually can fit multiple different aspects in multiple different ways. It gets complicated. Having said that, it doesn't always get things right. And in some cases, when it's trying to answer a question that you pose to it and trying to impress you in some way, shape, or form by coming up with an answer, because the goal was give me an answer, it may in fact find faulty data. It may make up data in some cases, okay? And that used to be a significant challenge when these models were first released. Having said that, now with the release of ChatGPT-5 as an example, that error rate has been brought down between 3 and 5%, whereas previously it was as high as 23% in some of the other earlier models. Okay, so that is getting better all the time. Data leakage. This is another issue, again, that we've kind of already talked about. What we never want to have happen is have sensitive data basically get released to an LLM's training material, okay? Because that would be obviously a breach of GDPR, that would be a breach of data privacy, and that would also be a breach of the EU AI Act, all of which work very, very closely in concert with one another, and all of which carry very significant and painful penalties. So we want to make sure that we don't do that. And again, it just comes down to standard operating procedures that say this is how it is, we protect data, and this is how it is we manage it. And you document that and you make sure that that's auditable. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense to you all. So as we've talked about, the recruitment process is one of those painful, often manual very heavy lifting cognitive processes that exist in any business. And it can be very, very difficult to develop a process that is smooth, that is streamlined, that is consistent, without having to bend to the needs, the wants, desires of hiring managers, of the sheer workload that you're carrying in terms of all of the different recruitment taking place. And of course, the variability of the recruitment that you're undertaking. Sometimes you're doing highly specialized technical stuff. You're doing, it really depends on your industry. You might be doing lots of administrative hiring. You might, you know what I mean? It's overload, no matter where you look. And because of that overload, and because of all the regulatory challenges associated with this stuff, we can find bottlenecks pretty much all throughout the entire process. And that puts us in a very bad situation as an employer in terms of our ability to attract, to interview and engage, and then hopefully bring on board terrific talent. So these issues, and this is important from a business case perspective when you're putting this forth to your executive teams, we lose candidate interest. People get frustrated with the time it's taking for us to talk. And the average kind of recruitment process can take up to a month, which is crazy. Okay. So people get tired of it. They basically are being interviewed by other folks, and they're going to kind of pick the folks who can kind of react most quickly. Hiring managers get frustrated because they have goals and targets that they have signed up to in terms of revenue issues or cost saving issues or product issues or whatever it is that are now in threat and in jeopardy of not being met. The business impact of unfulfilled positions in terms of lost productivity on the line and revenue development is substantial. It's a competitive disadvantage, obviously, if we can't break into the talent market and identify those top candidates, basically, and act on those as quickly as possible, because they're getting snapped up left, right, and center. But an AI-enhanced recruitment process can really reduce the time to hire to less than 20 days, right? Save thousands on a per hire basis, and improve the candidate experience and reduce burnout for the recruitment team, and basically put us in a much better position. So let's try to find the balance between the utilization of technology, the best utilization of the people involved, right? And how it is we can kind of ramp up the quality of the entire process overall. AI tools are all around us in HR technology. I think AI has probably had the most impact in the recruitment process. I would venture to say there are at least 3,000 plus AI driven or AI enabled tools out there on the market that have to do simply with the recruitment process, all the way on through to hiring and onboarding. Let me just go through three particular examples, because I picked these examples because they're rather novel. They're not sort of like the way you would think AI would necessarily make things better and faster. They're rather unusual uses of this additional intelligence. So as an example, HireVue is an AI-powered video interviewing platform that analyzes candidates' speech patterns, word choices, and nonverbal cues in the context of the conversation or the questions that they're being asked. And then basically does an analysis for each one of those individuals and scores them on a variety of different components, and provides as objective and holistic an evaluation as possible, and can also compare and contrast those various evaluations. Just super useful. It can reduce screening time up to 90%, I think, while also improving diversity, obviously, in the hiring process. There's a tool you probably haven't heard of that's on the market, and there are several like it coming up by a company called Paradox, who has invented a variety of different types of AI employees, if you will, who obviously are trained to be expert in their particular area. And Paradox's Olivia tool is a conversational AI assistant that engages with candidates 24/7, answers their questions, screens for qualifications, and it automatically schedules interviews. So it takes all of that, kind of painful process away. Really, really clever tool. I used a tool very recently called Jack and Jill, which was interesting. Again, completely auditory experience, speech related experience, using an AI bot basically to build out your background and look at your ambitions and your um, preferences and your desires, and basically tries to match that to existing tool sets. So the cool part about this is it really improves the candidate experience significantly. It reduces the administrative work that the recruitment team has to go through in terms of juggling schedules and things of that nature. And it basically helps radically pare down the top of the funnel. So you get a much more succinct and much more aligned group of candidates. Now, LinkedIn, as we know, has been around for a long, long time, and LinkedIn Recruiter is a tool that a lot of people use because you have access to loads of background data. You have access also to different project work, to educational components. I mean, literally everything you wanted to know, more or less, commercially or professionally about a person, you can find on LinkedIn. They have added now sort of an additional tool set, which is called LinkedIn Talent Insights. And that basically talks about real-time talent pool mapping, which is very, very useful, and provides supply versus demand metrics for any role in any location. And it enables, a sort of a much more data-driven approach to things like compensation and skills requirements, and importantly, sourcing strategies. So it can identify, for instance, if you're looking for a particular type of data engineer, it can find the top 10 schools globally where those people typically graduate from. And then you can use that data, for instance, to then start to develop your recruitment strategy. If you were looking for a near-term grad coming from a particular school system, and you want to kind of be much more exacting about that. So those are just examples of 3 tools. Like I said, there are thousands of them out there. So it's truly incredible. Every one of the AI Today in HR training modules will cover off notions related to AI usage policy, regional and federal regulations, and around privacy protection, GDPR, any AI related acts like the EU AI Act as an example. Possibly one of the world's best examples. I think Australia also has a good, strong example of that. The United States, oddly enough, is backing away from regulating AI at the moment. I suspect that will probably turn around once the administration moves on. This is important. It's a critical area, and I know you as HR professionals are typically, focused on things like risk mitigation, risk identification, and risk mitigation from a people perspective, which is oftentimes where some of the biggest risk is. We want to make sure, of course, that you fully understand what these regulations talk about and how it is you need to proceed relative to the use of tools like AI, and arguably tools that you already have up and running in terms of your ERP system. And we'll be happy to check that out. We're just going to do a very light touch offering here, just to kind of give you a sense for the fact that this will always ever be important. But we use something called the 3C rule as a framework for setting up LLMs safely and ethically in the recruitment process, or any process for that matter. First thing you want to do is you want to check in with and understand fully your company's AI usage policy. You may not have one at the moment. If that's the case, I would strongly urge HR to take a primary position in helping set that up and rally the troops in legal and compliance, as well as IT, and possibly operations, and start to work out what the details of an AI usage policy should look like, which hopefully is going to be a balance of encouragement to engage with these new incredible tools, to become much more innovative, much more creative, much more generative in terms of productivity overall. But also make sure people are very aware about what tools you guys are comfortable using, in what context, and how it is people, individuals, should engage with these tools. It's not impossible to reach out to the internet and find a slew of examples of policies that have already kind of been put together. So it's not as hard as you think. The hard part is getting everybody to understand it and getting everybody to play with it in a normal way, such that we can basically remain compliant. Secondly, we want to make sure that we are always able to, kind of clean our data. which is always ever important. Regardless of the tool that you ultimately end up using and what their promises might be in terms of the fact that your data will remain your data, it will not be used for any training data for the LLM. I would just play it safe. I would always ever make sure that your data is anonymized, that all candidate information is, that is personally indicative of who that might be, is removed and replaced with some sort of encryption key. I think that's certainly important. And the third is control. Okay, you want to kind of make sure that you can provide some control prompting. And what that simply means is simple, very, very simple. And like in any experiment, you always ever have sort of the experimental side, the thing that you're testing that hasn't been tested before. And then you have your control group, right? And you have your core data. So you know how a particular process works, or a particular mechanism works, or a particular tool works. Okay. So basically what you want to do is just develop some structured specific prompts that will guide the LLM to produce consistent and fair assessment. Do that by giving it criteria against which you want it to measure things. Okay. So you take its creative brain out of the process and say, no, I'm going to replace it with a structure, with an assessment structure, and I want you to kind of think this through. Okay. Then apply the appropriate weightings to the criteria that you ultimately create. And that again further helps the LLM get out of the business of making something up and guessing if that's what you wanted. Instead, just spell it out for it. Okay. And then test it thoroughly before deployment. So you would always ever, like we're doing right now and are about to do, you would always ever want to make sure that the process actually works and that you're getting consistent outcomes 2, 3, 4, 5 times in a row, so that you feel comfortable that the setup in terms of your criteria, the weighting of that criteria, and the prompting basically is producing the right result. Okay, now this is the bit where we go have a bit of fun. Our challenge here is to show how large language models can actually enhance and help us augment our thinking, if you will, in terms of how it is we want to kind of get involved in this. So we have a particular, I guess, a scenario that we've set up here, whereby you, as the HR person or the head TA person or whatever the case is helping your product team to hire a product owner. Okay, product owners are typically folks who are extraordinarily well-versed in a particular product type. They're typically there through the inception and creation and launch of a new product, and then they will follow that product in the market, and they'll make sure it's behaving properly, it's priced well, and that both consumers are thrilled with it and competitors are afraid of it. And basically that product owner will continue to kind of watch that product all the way through its life cycle. Okay. We didn't indicate what kind of industry this would be from. So typically product owners can come from any industry. We just said simply, this is a role that we're looking at. And then what we're going to do is kind of create an initial prompt to ask the LLM to analyze some anonymized synthetic candidate data profiles. Okay, when I say synthetic, what I mean is that we're actually going to ask the large language model to invent 15 candidates and some criteria thereafter for this particular exercise. Really incredible that it can do this. That refined iteration, sorry, what I should further say is that we're going to ask the LLM basically to score them against, key job requirements and provide a summary of each of the candidates' strengths and concerns. Okay, so without further ado, why don't we go ahead and pop over to the large language model, and let's see if we can pull that up. Just bear with me. Okay. Okay. Good. Just making sure I'm sharing the right screen. That's all set. So what happened here is I went into GPT-5, which is sort of the default mode, and basically said to it, I have a challenge for you, right? I am trying to hire a product owner, and I need to basically kind of assess 15 candidates against some criteria, and I want to give that criteria some weighting. I think the criteria we picked, if I'm not mistaken, had to do with agile, kind of productivity knowledge, leadership, and I think domain knowledge, if I'm not mistaken. Those are sort of the key areas. So I'm approaching this LLM from scratch, right? It doesn't know anything about what it is I want to kind of accomplish. And so in my initial prompt, all the way at the beginning of this exercise, if I can just go up there, looks something like this. I had to do some pre-thinking, right? To say, well, if I'm going to ask an LLM to randomly judge based on some criteria and some specific weightings, what an anonymized list of candidates might look like, I need to give it some background. I need to give it some foundation. I need to give it a basis upon which it can start making kind of critical decisions. And so what I simply did was I just kind of provided it as much context up here as I possibly could do. And I basically said, I need you to create the 15 candidates. But before that, I actually need a job description of what a product owner even looks like. Okay. And I'm going to be really basic with this. I'm not going to get into industry or context of the actual business itself at the moment. You should do. That will give you a much better answer even. And I told it basically when it creates this job description, I wanted to pick the top 10 skills and proficiency levels that a top candidate should possess. Okay. And I also want to hit you with this prompt when I'm done with that, which then spells out the fact that I'm going to ask you to look at agile and leadership and domain knowledge. And I'm going to give it specific percentage weightings. Okay. That's going to be certainly helpful. And then I'm going to say, go ahead and create the job description. Number one. Number two, also create the synthetic candidates. And let's go have some fun. Come all the way back down again. And here we go. So first step is, sorry for the running around. First step is create a job description for this exercise. And it did so. I did not give it any details about form, function, or anything like that. I just said, spell it out and give me 10 responsibilities for it. This actually spelled out more than I had asked for, which is super helpful, actually. Talks about role outcomes. It talks about key responsibilities and accountabilities. Inherent in that, obviously, are skills, focused, critical skills that somebody is meant to have. And I also asked for proficiency levels in those skills. So great. So now we have skills. We have, what good looks like, and we have a target level. Super helpful. And you'll see embedded in here are things like agile technologies, stakeholder management, leadership and influence, domain knowledge. Fantastic. So that's covered off. The scoring pillars used later in the exercise will include these bits, just like we talked about. So it's now saying to me, if this looks good on screen, say the word, and I'll move to step 2. So I'm going to say, okay, let's move to step 2. I hit return and I wait. Now off we go. Okay. And it kind of explains where you are, where the process is. And this is the creation, if you will, of 15 product owner candidates to look at. You'll notice down the first column that the candidate ID has been randomly assigned, but is unique to that individual. So we can decode that later on to find out who it is we're talking about. Gives us a quick summary of the person's made up background, and then kind of spells out the three elements against which we're going to measure the criteria. And it also gives us a scoring randomly for each one of these areas. And then talks about things like notable strengths and potential concerns, which could actually help us think it through once we get to a short list, which is good. So now we have 15 synthetic product owner candidate profiles to play with. Wonderful. Now, it's now saying to us, let's see, what is it saying? We want to display our recording. Okay, candidate. Good. Now, would you like me to run the step 3 process, which is the scoring pass of all of these 15 folks? And let's bring it down to the top 3 candidates. Yes, please proceed. Off we go. ChatGPT, by the way, is a consolidation of all of the other previous OpenAI models and includes, therefore, a reasoning model, which sometimes takes a little bit longer, but importantly, it actually does a bit more thinking about this. Right, so here we go. It has now gone through the 15, it's applied the criteria and the weighting, and it's come up with these 3 top candidates with scores in accordance with this 4.7 and then 4.6. It's great. It then kind of gave us, again, those strengths and concerns to help us kind of think through, who actually we think would probably fit in here with as few concerns and as many strengths as possible. Okay. And again, we don't now know who these individuals are necessarily because they've been anonymized. And so that's helping kind of reduce bias. We're going based on data scoring, which is great. Now, we want to go to the final step, step 4, which is rebalancing. And there's a new kind of like wrinkle in this. We're not satisfied that this is the perfect list. So we're going to go back to it and we're going to say instead, can you do us a favor and rebalance this so that no criterion is greater than 50%? Okay. And ensure that the diversity of industry experience and avoid penalties for career gaps. So this is just maybe a thing that kind of came up, in our recent history, whereby we had, I don't know, a lawsuit in terms of somebody basically saying we discriminated against them based on the fact that they were, off work for particular breaks and things of that nature, career gaps, if you will. And we want to avoid that process. So we've gone ahead and asked, our LLM, can you please make sure that we're not discriminating against that? Number one, so take that out of the equation in essence, and focus instead on, diversity of industry experience, and we've given it a new weighting and rating, which is good. So yes, please, let's do it. So now it's having a good old look at it, thinking it through, looking through the CVs. And now it's given us the rebalanced selection. So you'll notice the initial selection had candidate 3, then 6, then 11, okay, based on pure scoring. But in this particular version, it's kind of taken a look at other elements, okay? This is obviously synthetic data and it was very sparsely populated. So it doesn't have lots of great detail, but here's what it's done. It's rebalanced it. So now it's candidate 6, 3, and 11 in that order. Why? Well, the LLM tells us this gives us a fairer, more balanced top 3, okay? And then it goes into explanations as to why it chose each one of those individuals and why it put them in that order, which is super helpful. So you can immediately see you are suddenly a data analyst, right? Just by asking some very simple questions. And it's mind-boggling what this tool is capable of doing. But again, be explicit. Think it through first and make sure that you, again, are giving it specific measurement capability against a model against which to kind of work. And that's when you're going to get the best out of a large language model, is if you give it, guardrails, you give it a framework, you give it structure, and you give it context. And man, it will go to town and really start to help you. Right. So let's get back to the old presentation. I hope that was super helpful. Just want to kind of like sure that we're all aligned here. Good. Okay, and so in every one of our training sessions that we run in the AI Today in HR BFI series, we will introduce a notion called a 7-day action plan. Okay, and this is simply just to keep your knowledge fresh and your comfort level high with the use of AI tools to solve real world HR challenges. And today we're going to basically be discussing a 7-day action plan to validate the effectiveness of AI in your recruitment process. So the first step is to select a current vacancy that has at least 15 applications and hasn't been shortlisted yet, okay? And this will give us a baseline to compare the AI versus the human, kind of review of the results. And next, then you should analyze or anonymize rather the 15 CVs, regarding this vacancy so that we can make sure that we protect the information and hopefully remove that set of bias from the TA individual and the person who's also running the AI model against it. And so just remove all the personally identifiable information and replace it with a unique code. And then run the large language model prompt on the anonymized data and have a recruiter independently create their own shortlist. And then compare and contrast those results in terms of things like quality, diversity, efficiency, and scoring efficacy. Okay. And this micropilot hopefully should help us validate the fact that over and over again, with great consistency, these large language models can be extraordinarily effective, whereas humans can get tired. Humans have a lot going on. There are probably multiple different work streams for any TA professional, an HR professional, happening at any one time. It's very easy to lose focus. It's very easy to miss something. In this particular case, if we hand over that level of analysis and insight to an LLM, fantastic. It will basically consistently go through it time after time, which is terrific. So the central goal of this AI Recruitment Accelerator program is faster, fairer, and more accurate hiring, okay, based on proven skills and reduction, if not elimination, of cognitive biases of the interviewers in the process. AI tools, generally speaking, have really helped cut time to hire from 45 to 60 days right down to under 20 days, okay, whilst increasing accuracy and the quality of new hires. Using natural language processing, okay, and the model prompting that we've just gone through, it creates and enables a consistent and fair evaluation of the candidates because we gave it the criteria. We then gave it the weighting, and then we gave it the context and said, go to town, please help us with this information, and it did so, okay? The proper setup and the implementation ensures compliance with the AI usage policies, with privacy protection regulations, and the quality of the process overall. It's important when you go through these experiments that you just spend a little bit of time journaling, just document this stuff. Really important and useful, because when you do so, you basically are laying the groundwork for a consistent treatment of sensitive information relative to AI over and over again. And everybody can start to follow and copy on that example and then start to layer upon it. So I hope this presentation provided some really useful insights and gave you a range of helpful resources. And we will also, in every instance, provide, in this particular case, an AI recruitment toolkit, okay, and prompt engineering templates, as well as some case studies. And we'd really appreciate it if you wouldn't mind, at the bottom of this slide here, if you wouldn't mind taking a few minutes to answer some important questions about the sample training course by clicking the click here button here below and help us improve the program. I thank you for attending, and I wish you all the great things in this era of AI. Take care.